Welcome to Establish the Edge. I'm your host, Mike Leone. Excited to bring a new episode for y'all today. Going to be talking about dynasty rules and different ways to set up your dynasty league, ways to possibly end your league, ways to encourage trading, all that stuff. I have special guest Mike Schopp with us, which is pretty cool for me to have him on because I grew up listening to him on the radio. He's one of the local radio hosts here at WGR 550 in Buffalo. So, Mike, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, Mike, this is a real treat for me. I've been an admirer of yours for a few years. We've gotten to know each other. Two Mikes, no hats, or five, if you can see behind me. I was really excited when you asked.
Yeah, and Mike, you started a dynasty league for us. I think we're entering year 3 now, so this will be our second full off season of the league, and it's an Empire Dynasty League. For those not familiar with that format, in an Empire Dynasty League, there's a certain portion of the prize pool that's set aside and progressive for if anyone ever wins the league 2 years in a row. So not only will they get that prize pool, but the league at that point will end. So that was something that when I first, heard about it, I wasn't so sure about. And fast forward a couple years, I think it's a really cool, innovative way to play. I know I find myself in my leagues now. I just got into Dynasty when COVID started. Like I got into Dynasty heavy. We kind of had that period in March, April. People were inside, did a few startups, and I'm at a point now where I want to do more leagues because the startup's so much fun. But if you're never finishing leagues, it can be difficult to just be in that many leagues. So the Empire League's definitely appealing. I don't know if you want to talk about that league a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted an expert league. I myself started Dynasty maybe 6 years ago. A league that I created is going into year 6, the League of Shopes and Dreams. So I remember, since in preparing for today, I remember back then really just thinking like I want to make it good, but I've never even really played in one. I got to keep it simple. And then in a year or two, the league, while it's fine, it was almost like too simple for me. I wanted something more complicated. So our Empire Niagara League is that. I mean, there are some tweaks that I think are unique to our leagues, or to our league rather. The playoff format is one, and the divisions, how we do that. And I could explain that if you want. Also, the IDP thing that I think is annoying to you, but we have a little bit of an IDP twist in our league. And Empire, I mean, somebody's going to have to win 2 years in a row in a league with some real good players. And it did almost happen the first 2 years. The guy who had the best team in year 2 was the first year winner and went out in the playoffs. So it was close to happening, but like I'm one of the oldest guys in it, and I really was intrigued by this conversation about how to end these leagues, because like in this, we have a plan for that. If somebody wins 2 years in a row, we're done. If it doesn't happen, the money keeps piling up, and we better be smart about how we manage that. And it could go on infinitely, I suppose, in theory. But like a dynasty league, how to do that is a really interesting question. And I know you got some ideas yesterday.
Yeah, I got some ideas. I'll talk about them in a little bit. I know with Empire specifically, some of the advantages to doing it that way. You kind of are rewarding a dynasty if someone wins 2 years in a row. So I like that aspect of it. You've also, a lot of these leagues, I got a response on Twitter was, most of these people are just restarting the league right away. So it gives you an opportunity to tweak rules you might not like, or just change it a little bit so it becomes a bit more dynamic. So even though it ends, it's not necessarily over forever. It's kind of just like a restart more than a full conclusion. So I found that part pretty interesting. And talking about this league too, and we did a podcast last year on Establish the Edge. I did it with Anthony Amico and Kyle Daly, where we really got to the nuts and bolts of like the rules to set up your league. But I like Empire a lot. For starters, I think Superflex Tight End Premium is the way to play everything, which is what this league is set up as. And you mentioned, Mike, how when you first started a league, it was almost too simple. And I'm in a league like that where it's meant to be like a low maintenance league, but it does feel a little static where there's only so many moves you can make because it's a single quarterback league. It's not tight end premium, and there's just less ways to build your roster. And I'm all about leagues that expand the player pool in terms of who has value and kind of evens that out. I think that makes it more dynamic, more fun. I play in a lot of best ball dynasty leagues. I think do that a lot because it rewards depth more than some of the leagues where you have a 4 starting lineup. Your league still rewards depth because it's pretty deep roster spots in terms of starters.
Right. And, the format is of course, a big component of what makes a league fun and interesting. But I think the very best leagues go beyond that, where the format is interesting and it keeps you occupied year round. But I want there to be a social aspect to it that's good. Like, for one thing, and this is kind of cool, like I just had this idea maybe 10 minutes before we started today. I'm going to run it by you for this league that we're in together. The rookie draft is very short. It's like an hour. And it might be the only time in a redraft league, it's a day. But in a dynasty league where you're drafting 6 rounds of rookies, say, it's pretty short. So you want to couple it with something else. Last year, we played golf in the morning and then had the draft. And that ended up happening because I stole this idea from the Masters, basically. The Masters, you win the Masters golf tournament and you pick the menu for the next year's champions dinner. So I wanted something like that. So I think maybe all my dynasty leagues have, where are we going, or what a theme, a location, a menu, even what do you want if you win? And this year, our winner didn't really have a great idea. He works at a candy store, and I thought that would be perfect. And, Santa visits this store and you could dress up like Santa and we could have, but he hated that idea. So, the draft is so short, Mike. How about we couple it with another draft? A best ball draft to follow our rookie draft. So it's a longer day. Not everybody would have to do it. If everybody in the league wanted to do it, then you could incorporate those results into our league. Like it's an extra draft pick or something like that if you win the best ball league. So, just the format is important. Super flex, yes. Tight end premium, yes. 3 receivers. It's the Draft Sharks invitational format that I took for ours. I thought, working with those guys, it was like as close to optimal as I knew of. But then, social and figuring out clever ways and ways to bring people together, I think matters a lot too.
Yeah. And we're lucky in that we have a local league where we're able to do this and get together. And I do think there's a couple, things to hit on there. One, I'm always interested in ways to reward people aside from just like the playoff championship prize pool. And having, your choice of where the draft's going to be is one way to do that in a small way, but also like getting together definitely increases the likelihood of trades. You get to know people, right. You get more comfortable with people, especially with the golf outing. I mean, you're 4 hours on the golf course. There's going to be some trade ideas prior to the rookie draft. You got to play the golf prior to the rookie draft.
Right.
I think I ended up making a massive trade after like 90% of the people went home and we were sitting around. I traded
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I traded Jamar Chase and Tua for Lamar Jackson and Devonta Smith, which is was quite the big trade. And that's probably not happening if we're not there in person getting all hyped. So
right. Long day in the sun, beer, etc.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a bunch of fun. But as I said, this league's a little bit deeper starting rosters, which I like. And there's like flexibility in how you can do your starting roster, like a lot of flex spots. I like that. This startup was auction, which I highly recommend. If you listen to the last year's version of this podcast, I think it's titled like True Dynasty Virgins or something because it was the nerdiest podcast I've done. You can check it out on the Establish the Edge feed. But Kyle talked through if you also want to do an auction rookie draft, there were some cool ways to convert draft picks into auction dollars. So check that out from last year if you're interested. But Mike, you mentioned the unique playoff design. Why don't you walk through how that works a little bit? Because I think the playoff setup is really important.
Ours, I'm not sure I would say that this one is better, but it's different, and I like it because it's different. I took this idea from curling. I'm a big curling fan. Canadian curling, the Brier and the Scotties every year is a big event for me. and they've used something called the page playoff, which isn't specific to curling, but basically they have, say, it might be 16 teams, or now it's 18 teams. And after the two divisions play out, like what in our case amounts to the regular season, which we do 10 weeks, it's 16 divisions. You play the 5 teams in your division twice each. That's it. You don't cross over until phase 2, which is weeks 11 to 14. Only the top 4 teams per division go through. The last place, the bottom 2 teams in each division after week 10 are done. Transactions are frozen. That's it. So the top 4 on each side then cross over for 4 weeks, and you take your records with you. Where you end up after 14 weeks is, you have a standings. It's an 18 league at that point, and the top 4 go to week 15. And this is the page playoff piece. I do like this. I think, well, you can decide for yourselves, but in week 15, 1 plays 2 and 3 plays 4. The 1-2 winner skips to the final in 17. The loser is still alive because they were top 2. So the loser goes to week 16 and plays the 3-4 winner. The 3-4 loser in week 15 is out. No money, not the 4th place. Thanks for playing. And then week 16 is the 1-2 loser versus the 3-4 winner. And then the 1-2 winner is waiting for that winner in week 17. So the 3rd place is the loser in week 16, and then 1st and 2nd is the championship. Again, I'll just say to close, like, I'm not sure it's better, but it's different. I like this different. And by the way, one more thing about this league, and this is an idea I took from a sports writer named Sean McIndoe for The Athletic. Down Goes Brown on Twitter. He's a hockey writer, super creative guy. We used to talk to him all the time years ago, Mike, when the Sabres were, in the lottery, which they kind of recently still have been, but they're kind of coming out of that. And ways to prevent tanking. Like, this is a big one for dynasty owners. If you have somebody who's tanking and you don't want that, we have a rule where you cannot use your own 1st round pick. You can use somebody else's. You have to trade it if it comes to when you're on the clock and you're sitting there with your own 1st round pick, which has not happened and probably will never happen, you forfeit it. And an easy way to sort of take care of that is, and this is what if real sports were more fun, this is what would happen. You think your team is better. I think my team is better than yours. And you will maybe disagree. I'm not saying that literally in terms of us, but let's say I say my team is better than yours. And I offer you my 1st for yours. Just Adam Krautwurst and I just did this the other day. I looked at my roster. I looked at his. I didn't talk to him, but I said, I like my team more. I'll send you my number 1 for your number 1. He snap called because Adam's like, he's cool like that. Like, okay, that'll be fun. It's like side bet, basically. And so I have his number 1 pick. He has mine, and that's it. And we're fine. But if you end up with your own, you can't use it. And so those kind of trades, wouldn't that be great in real sports, Mike? If some team in the NFL right now, looking ahead to next year, say, but maybe they were in a team that was considered really good and they liked what they had. Seattle last year or something like that. I know there was a trade, but anyway, you get the point. Basically, you're challenging another team in the league. And if you're right, and you do have the better season, you end up with the better draft pick too.
Yeah, me and Drew Dinkmeyer of ETR a couple years ago in a league, I think we traded 2 years of full drafts, which was it was stressful, those playoff runs, because even like a 4-pick swing, it can be pretty dramatic come rookie draft time. Like you don't think much of it when you make the trade. So I love those trades. It's also interesting too, if like you think your team's going to be bad, you might want to wait to trade your 1st round pick till it's solidified and is a really good pick. Not that you want your team to be bad, but like if you're just being realistic about things.
Yep.
Back to the playoff format. What's fun about that is it's still head to head. I'm more of a points guy, but there is some level of intrigue and fun, especially like a local league where we know each other a bit more, of playing like the head to head format. But it rewards the regular season success. I think any good playoff format, and particularly in Dynasty, like I like the combination of, okay, if you run hot in the playoffs, you can win, but you still have a built-in advantage other than just seeding from from the regular season. So with the records carrying over and the wrinkle at the end, where if you are a top 2 seed remaining, it's double elimination for you. Not double elimination, but
Yeah, you're right. You get 2 cracks at it. You can lose and still win. That's right.
Yeah. So I like that aspect of it a lot. One thing that I've been thinking about, if I start another league too, thinking about prizes aside from like playoff prizes and stuff, I'd like to pay out cumulative points of like past 3 seasons, like maybe wait for that prize to start until year 3 or something. I used to do this in a keeper league, but I think for Dynasty, that would be interesting too. Cause I know I've been in a Dynasty league where we had the best team 5 years running and just had the worst playoff luck. And so obviously I'm biased here, but it feels like there should be some sort of reward for sustained success over a long period, even if that doesn't net you a championship.
I like that. I can point you to a guy who runs a league I'm in where that's the setup. The Bills would have some sort of trophy at this point if they had that, right?
We would.
They'd have a couple of banners.
So, do you have any other ideas for like, I don't know, just creative prizes, whether it's directly from the prize pool, or I know we talked about the the Masters kind of setup that you've got with a lot of your local leagues.
Yeah, if people take pride in that, which like I would. It's awkward when it's a league that I run, and I'm going to tell everybody that we're going to Canada for a draft, which I'm doing. Then I think that does have some value. I mean, sustained success. I agree with certainly the logic that those are the fantasy players who deserve to be rewarded. I think a trophy is like almost a given. And as I say that, I realize we don't have one in the Empire League, but I love a trophy. Certain other clever bragging rights. You wouldn't want to you wouldn't want to affect competitive balance in this way, but in terms of prizes, sure. I'll mention too, just for a different concept, I guess it's not Dynasty and it's not exactly specific to what you're saying, but an idea that I stole from, I don't know if you want me to, if it's okay to name the site.
Yeah.
RotoWire. I stole this from Chris Liss at RotoWire. I think it's Chris and Davis Maddock, and I think he might be in it. I don't know. I'm just name dropping, but they have a league called the Stake League. Do you know that one?
I'm not familiar with it.
So myself and 2 friends who are also in Empire Niagara did our own version of a Stake League. The Stake League, from what I remember from Chris Liss, is to 12 teams. Doesn't have to be best ball or managed, just a 12-team fantasy league, but there's no money. The end of the season, they all go out for a fancy steak dinner, and the guys who finished in the middle 5 through 8 pay their own bill. The guys who finished 9 through 12 pay for themselves, and the guys who finished top 4. And there's like no shame. It's a shameless, get whatever you want. You can't get meals to go, I think, but have a night in the Stake League. And that's probably about the kind of money or more that most of us are playing for anyway in home leagues. So, the 3 of us tonight agreed in a little best ball draft we did last year. Whoever among the 3 of us would be treated by the guy who finished last. I happened to finish first in that. So I'm looking forward to this evening very much.
Yeah. And taking that from it's a fun concept, but even thinking logically for Dynasty leagues, talk about anti-tanking, like some sort of incentive to not be one of the worst teams in the league. What's hard, I think it's not hard for me because I love the extreme. So I often have teams that are all in, or I'm fine doing a complete rebuild. But there's a lot of people, I think they feel like they get stuck in the middle, and they're like not really sure what to do. They kind of want a team that's going to have sustained success, and they feel like, and part of that's just you got to suck it up and choose a direction at some point. But there is something to if there's a punishment for being one of the final 4 teams, or in FFPC, one of the high stakes leagues that I share with Dink, this was frustrating for us, but the way they do their draft pick is the 6 teams that don't make the playoffs play consolation playoffs, and the winner of the consolation playoffs gets to 101 instead of the worst team in the league. So we had the best team of the 6 non-playoff teams and then managed to lose in the first round of the consolation playoffs and still draw the 6th pick. So I guess we would have gotten the 6th pick either way. If you had done it the traditional way, we at least had a chance at it. It certainly hurts with Bijan Robinson at the 101 that we could use on that squad. But I do like that idea of, and I'll probably sound hypocritical because I'm in leagues where I'm like tanking and I'm like, no, I'm getting the 101 next year. It's like shout out Caleb Williams. But
well,
yeah, the anti-tanking stuff though is interesting to me.
I think a couple things. One, in that Empire example where you have to trade your first round pick, there's no possibility of tanking. Like you could, have the second pick or whatever, but like there's no particular incentive to finish last that way. You won't have the first pick. You don't need a lottery either with that. And I'm not really a fan of the lottery. I feel like it's just sort of a simple little bit of an insurance against it. And so I am in leagues that have it, but I don't really like the lottery. I don't really think it accomplishes very much. And so consolation bracket, we do leagues where you get an extra pick at the end of the first round. I feel like that's a more, in my opinion anyway, a more appropriate reward for winning the consolation. But I don't either think that the way you just described is too rich for a team that might be like the 7th best team or whatever that amounts to. This is also something we talked a lot about with the Sabres over the years. Like they have something called the gold plan. Maybe you're familiar with in sports, like in the analytics community, gold was the last name of the guy who came up with it. From the day you're eliminated from playoff contention to the end of the season, most points. So a team that's worse, San Jose, I think, for example, was eliminated last night. They were the first team eliminated from the NHL playoffs, or won't make it. However many points they get the rest of the year is their number. A team that's closer to making it won't have a chance to get as many points, but the Sharks still have to win. They still have to, accrue points to be able to get there. It's not perfect because the players have no particular incentive to have their team get the first pick, but you might then somehow a little bit mute the chances of teams just completely, like the Sabres. Like the Sabres that year traded their good goalie because he was good. Like they really wanted to ensure last place.
Yeah, it's like a weighted tank kind of.
Right.
You're going to have more opportunities to get the first pick, but like you said, you still have to ultimately win. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more. We teased it a little bit, but talk about like how leagues could potentially end. I think that's kind of a hot topic in Dynasty now, especially as more people get into them. People love the startup drafts, but like no one wants to like leave a league, and for no good reason and put the league members in a bad spot. And I think about too, like the leagues I run, like I don't think they're going to die anytime soon, but like in 15 years, who knows what's going to, who's going to be in the league still and what's going to happen. So the Empire League that we're in, as we said, if someone wins 2 years in a row, there's a certain portion of the pot that goes to them and the league either restarts or ends. I was talking to Scott Fish, who does a lot of stuff with my fantasy league. And he gave me some really good ideas for ways leagues end. He also gave me some data that what he's seen surprisingly is like 35% of Empire leagues end in the first 4 years and a little bit over 10% in those first 2 years, which we had a close call in ours. So, he suggests one wrinkle is to not start the Empire portion until like after X number of years, like first one to win back-to-back after 3 years or something. But I kind of like the risk off the bat. I know I built in our league a little bit of a younger rebuild squad. I don't even know if I should say rebuild, but definitely a longer term team that, was at risk of throwing some money away because if someone else won 2 years right off the bat, I wouldn't have time to see my team come to fruition. But I sort of like the risk reward dynamic there in Empire. Other leagues have just like if someone wins 3 times, first person to win 3 times. Do you have any favorites of these? I mean, you're probably partial to Empire, but like aside from Empire.
Yeah, no. I mean, in terms of your build, by the way, I'm sitting here listening to you with on my roster: Fields, Lance, Kyle Pitts, ETN. I mean, I feel like that it lines up with what I would consider the most optimal way to draft any dynasty startup, where you have young, good players, of course. So that there is maybe a plus EV in drafting like a Mike Evans or Derrick Henry, guys like that, to sort of counter that. But it's the way I want to do it anyway. It's the most fun way to build a team. I don't think I would feel like we have to wait, but in this league, it is going to be hard to win 2 in a row. It is always hard to win 2 in a row. And if we're talking about $1,200 a year set aside for the possibility of someone winning 2 years in a row, I mean, there are going to be real challenges over the years with that. You have to be really careful with the money. And also, Mike, I mean, people come and go. Like, we've already had somebody quit the league after a second year, and you and I worked together you ended up helping us find somebody. But like, what should they have to buy in for? Like, if they just come in at the entry fee, they're right there in a spot where in 2 years they're taking down this massive pot that they didn't contribute to at all before now. So I feel like I'd love to know, maybe I'll talk to Scott. Like, I'd love to know if there's a certain way of sort of best doing that, because we ended up compromising on that with your friend. He paid half of it, basically, of the 200 that everybody else has contributed to that pot over 2 years, which seemed like a fair ask, and he was amenable to that. Also, I play in a hockey league where it's called Empire, but it's not 2 in a row. It's the first to win 2 times at all, and that shortens the likely shelf life. It's not going to last longer than 13 years. That way, even that would be insane if that happened. I am in a baseball league where we had 9 different winners in a row. That's pretty amazing.
Wow.
So I think that's a just tweak Empire to mean any 2 titles and you're done.
Yeah, I think that rule 2 would work for, like, if you're in an existing, like, a lot of this stuff should be thought about before the league starts, right? But like, let's say you're in an existing league and you want to get something on the books, that's an easy way to implement. Just say, listen, from this point on, first person to win 2 champions, we're calling it, or 3, whatever the number is, depending on like the expected length that you want. I feel like 3 is a pretty good number, where you're probably looking at like 10 years. And if someone wins 3, I mean, that's a lot of championships. Like, kudos to them. So somewhere in that 2 to 3 area. Some other ideas I got was just a predetermined length prior that everyone agrees on ahead of time. And the way Scott was suggesting dealing with, you mentioned the logistics of like payouts and stuff can be tough, especially if people are going to leave. One way is like everybody pays. If it's going to be a 5-year league, everybody pays up front. The prizes are what they are. They get paid out each year. As long as you're comfortable with someone handling that money, that's easy, but it's a lot for people to pay up front. He had an interesting wrinkle, which would be, if you didn't want to pay it all up front, have like your entry fee year 1 start high and your prizes actually start lower than the prize pool. And then over time it converges where the entry fee actually shrinks and the prizes rise, which will, dissuade people from leaving, but also make it pretty easy to find people to take over a team, because their expected value is immediately positive if they're paying, a smaller entry fee relative to the prizes. So I don't think I'm a fan of like the predetermined length. I like having it be something that organically happens, that's a little bit more random, but I'm a risk taker. I like having that sort of uncertainty involved in the way that it goes.
What happened with Empire Niagara, suddenly it's year 2. We all signed up for the long term and we're faced with the fairly likely possibility that it would be over. And I talked to everybody, in the league about that. We might be done, just in passing, this could be it. And about half the people in the league told me they were rooting for it because they didn't like their draft, or they love the startup so much. It's such a great day. And like, all right, fine, let's do it again. And you look at it like neither you nor I have won yet. So we're at best 2 years away from taking it down, right? So you have that kind of a plan. Sure, to win 1, you can't win 2 without 1, but it's really winning 2 that you're in it for. Well, one idea that you thought of, or heard about that you shared for this that I like the most is the guillotine idea, where if somebody leaves the league, then you're just one player shorter. The players on that team go into the draft, and if you were 12, now you're 11. And that way, you're still playing for real money. We're at 2 years and counting for that side pool. Nobody else can sort of tap into that unfairly. And eventually, you just that much more likely to get to a winner because as each person leaves, however it happens, I mean, that's, it's like just like sort of an endurance game where one by one, they just sort of quit. And, I feel like that's a way you could do it.
Yeah, and you can start out, you start out with 12, 14 teams, whatever it is, and then have a predetermined amount of teams where the year that it gets to those teams, that's going to be it. That's going to be the final year. So maybe it's 8 teams. When you get to 8 teams remaining, it's done. And that keeps it a little bit fresh, which is fun too. Some other ideas I heard, I don't know if you've ever participated in like a salary cap type league where players actually have contracts. I know Louis G, who is in our Empire Niagara League, he was inviting me into one of those, and I just didn't have the time for it. But I did get a couple responses on Twitter where people said, like, this is kind of a good split the difference between keeper league, dynasty league, redraft, like all three hybrid is having sort of these escalating contracts. And I guess I've done an auction keeper league where we sort of have those rules where, you keep the guy for whatever you want them in at auction, at draft, and then they have raises. But some of these leagues get into like these complicated contracts. Have you ever played in a contract league?
I'm in the one that he invited you into.
Okay.
I've won 3 out of 5. I just want to say.
So you do know the contract league well.
A little bit, but there's no dollar amount in that, and that's my breaking point. Like the one baseball league I do is very challenging because with contracts, like the player salary goes up a little bit, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and that's where I find myself really just how I am. I have a tough time staying focused when it comes to that one, is staying organized. I mean, you and I both play in a lot, and it's pretty much impossible to have files in your brain for like who's on everybody's roster. And to do well in Dynasty, you want some amount of that for trading. Like, you want to know, who's weak or who's strong, and you could always look, but it just takes all the time you have to just be poring over leagues and figuring out like, well, what's out here for a move. So you want to have, some of that to memory. And when it gets into contracts, in the case of the league you mentioned, in particular, I mean, I guess I've done it right, but you can't. I can't keep track of that mentally. So I think to do well in Dynasty or any fantasy, you want to have the most in your head about what else is the rest of the league landscape. What is everybody's motivation? Are they contending? Are they backing up? Whatever, so that you can more intuitively come to ideas when it comes to trades.
So how do the contracts work then? It's just a length of time that you can have the player?
It's based on when you drafted them. So if you drafted them in the first 3 rounds, it's 3 years plus potentially 2 franchise tags. Rounds 4 through 8, it's 2 plus 2 franchise tags. 9 and on, it's 1, just that one first year, and plus 2 franchise tags. Also, Mike, how do you think of this? What do you think of this? That baseball league I'm in, they have a rule: if you pick the player up during the season, you're not allowed to protect them. So we automatically, anybody that starts the season on waivers will be in next year's draft. I think I like that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, again, it sort of depends on what you want to reward, but it is kind of tough, I think, depending on how waivers are set up too. Like if it's a first come, first serve, it's like some guy randomly was up early in the morning and has like this franchise altering free agent pickup isn't exactly what you're going for. So I lean on that side of it. When these guys get thrown back, then are they in the rookie draft or is there a separate draft for free agents?
You can do that either way. This league in particular has like it's baseball. It has farm systems. So for the most part, the quote rookie draft is veterans. The way rosters are, the cuts happen and everything like that. But I think you could do that either way. But I just like the grinder piece is such an important piece in success in fantasy or success in anything like this. I mean, the guy we play with a guy, Ryan Mura, who I think of like he is all over it. And sometimes I even get upset. Like I can't keep up. I'm in too much. This is the one people ask you, how can you play in so many leagues? I'm like, I don't know, I manage. But in this one particular area, this is where I do get beat because it's just too much volume. And a guy like that who is sharp and he's just like he's got the deadlines, whatever in his mind or he's on his phone or whatever. Like he knows when waivers is and all that stuff for each of these leagues. He's often first to it, and it'd be nice to beat Ryan, but if you sort of have this rule, anybody that gets picked up on waivers is automatically in next year's draft. However it is you build that, that kind of reduces that edge. So somebody in all these leagues, there are always guys who like don't do anything on waivers all year. They just sit there, and I'm not looking to help them per se. But they're not going to get run over. To the same extent with that rule.
We got to get you in some best ball leagues, Mike. Some best ball in season, no waivers. Oh, yeah. That's the beauty. You can draft a team, not worry about it. And I guess like a final thing before we sign off, is the best ball made me think of it, but encouraging trades. You have the rule that's anti-tanking, but also encourages trades where you can't use your own first round pick. I'm in some best ball leagues that do open up like a 1 week trade window in season. That works really well, where I think because it's like 1 week and everybody's focused on it, it really encourages trades. Like one, it's mid-season, so people know where their teams are headed, if they're going to bow out or not, especially with us not having free agency in these best ball leagues in season, people kind of know. So if they're, a tentative to make a trade before the season, they know to make it now. But I do think having that focused 1 week period, I don't know, there's just something like the aura to it, I think adds a little bit more, where if you just had trading open all the time, it seems counterintuitive, but I actually think there's more trading when we have that single 1 week trade window.
Is there any particular added benefit to doing that, or is that the only time when it's allowed, you're saying?
So that's the only, because this is the rule in a couple of my best ball leagues where it's best ball, no pickups in season. There's no trading other than the 1 week trade window. The idea is that like these are supposed to be lower maintenance leagues, but we still want there to be some trading activity. But I found there's some, like everyone kind of looks forward to the deadline. They only have to pay attention. I think that's the other thing's the focus, right? Like if you're focusing on all these leagues all the time, it can be difficult. It can be overwhelming. But if it's like, okay, we've got 5 days to trade in this league, you just got to focus on those 5 days. I think people get into it a little bit more, which, the original intent wasn't that it would spur a ton of trades. The original intent was just to give some teams that are losing like a chance to play for next year and some of the winning teams a chance to win. But I think overall we've seen that it's just spurred on trading more than we expected.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'd also like, maybe with that, incorporate a ban on using the word reasonable when in the chat or whatever, announcing that certain of your players are available and you will accept offers, but only if they're reasonable. You know what? Here's the reality. You don't need to tell your league that guys are available because we're all assuming that they all are available all the time. So, if you're playing with sharp players, I think pretty much what that does, I have to concede the one thing that does do is it starts the conversation. And that's kind of what you're talking about, is to sort of spark movement. And so when one guy stops by to say, shopping Austin Eckler or something, then maybe that'll work. But when they bring it with, we'll listen to reasonable offers, you know what? Get out of here. Because you can decide whether you think my offer was reasonable, and that's fine. But I'm not going to sit here and worry about whether if it isn't, you're going to like put me on blast or something, or just like, I think my offer will be reasonable, or else I won't make it. So I don't want to play by your standards. I'm anal about it.
Yeah, we could definitely do an entire episode on trade etiquette and stuff. But yeah, sometimes it gets, sometimes Yeah, I'll shoot it. I've seen people shoot trade off, like not even fake trade offers, just to send me a message, get my attention. Um, I feel like if I'm putting someone on the trade block, again, I'm not putting like reasonable offers
Yeah.
because that's like sort of like an absurd premise on its face. But if I'm putting someone on the trade block, I feel like it's a signal that I'm trading this player for market value. Like because some people they'll want to trade a player they like more than the market, and it's like, well, that's not how this works. Okay,
Right.
those are the
Right.
players you should be trading for, not trying to trade.
Yeah. Like there is, of course, there's variance whether you're using whatever website you're using or app, but an amalgam of that, there is a considered value on a player. And so that's the baseline. Okay. And I feel like I want my offer to sort of settle into that range. If it doesn't, or if your idea of what you could get, that you should announce that too. I only will take, that's fine. Like if your valuation is markedly different than whatever that considered value is, you should say so. You're probably familiar with a guy named Austin Martin.
Yep.
Who plays a lot of high stakes. And he's a guy who I like in this area. I just made him an offer last week. And his response was, this is what you probably deserve, but down here is what I'm offering you, because of like he didn't really need the player as badly enough to pay what we sort of both intuitively felt or some other way was fair. And so yeah, I like that. If you got to know what that, it's not a certain website established the edge doesn't get to decide that, the deep end doesn't get to decide that, but in general there's put a number on a player, and if you're looking to make a trade where your idea is different than that, you probably should say that up front.
Yeah, and I've been there where it's like, listen, I know this is a fair offer, but I'm only taking this. Like
Right.
another way I've gotten trades to spur. It doesn't always work, but I'll just be like, first person to send me, a second round pick for player Y, I'm accepting it.
Yeah.
Which helps reduce on, because there are some people that just like to counter the offer no matter what. They like to sit on it. They're like very nervous, and sometimes that will spur people to action when they know that like then you really find out if they think it's fair or not, versus if they're just trying to squeeze you for value.
Yeah. The people who sort of question you when you don't counter their offer, like, you know what, I've already decided that it's not worth my time.
Yeah.
Based on what your original offer is, there's like, where's the counter? No, there's not a counter. I'm not running this race with you. Like, it's just, we're in very different places. I have pulled muscles with the speed with which it's the only thing I do in life fast is the move to the keyboard to reject a trade offer. Like, just, I want you to know that this took me 4 seconds from when I saw it to when I was out. Like, I want you to know that I broke records with the little time it took me to reject this trade. Ow! You shouldn't have needed to do that so fast.
I love it. I'm sending you a message with how quickly I rejected this trade. That's how bad it was.
Yes, it was actually negative time. Somehow I was able to process this and reject it in negative time.
I love the listen, I'm really doing you a favor here.
Yes, that's another one. You don't need to explain to me why I should make this trade with you. That's almost offensive.
Oh man, good stuff. All right, well, Mike, thanks so much. Anything else that you thought was interesting that we didn't cover? We ran the gamut pretty good here, but if there's anything else, feel free.
No, I think I was able to think of a lot of different sort of details in different sports and different leagues, which I'm glad for. You can find me with Adam Krautwurst every Tuesday on the Deep End at Deep End FF1 if you're interested. We do a high stakes sort of centric podcast usually, but it's the same topics that everybody in fantasy is talking about, depending on where we're at in the calendar. Free agency today, for example, we went on last night and talked about some of those moves. And as you mentioned too, I'm on WGR in Buffalo weekday afternoon. So that's my day today, 3 to 7 with the Bulldog. We've got pretty much coming up on 20 years. I'm at like 25 in broadcasting or more, almost 30. And so I'm very proud of that. And I get as much fantasy content on that show as is possible. I force it onto everybody. Bulldog hates it. You grew up listening to me. You never heard fantasy from me until like 5 years ago, and now it's all I care about.
I love it. Keep pushing it. All right. Thanks so much, Mike. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You can check out this podcast, and obviously, if you're listening to it, you know where it's found, but on iTunes, as well as the video version up on the Established to Run YouTube channel. You know, give us a like, subscribe. All that stuff helps me keep doing these podcasts for free. Thanks so much, everybody. Good luck in your upcoming Dynasty drafts.